Vikas Bairagi has said regrets that he will not be able to participate today, but I'm sure he is with us in spirit. First, I would like to introduce the chair of the session, Major General Dr. Purna Silwal. Major General Dr. Purna Silwal has held several positions in the Nepal Army, including Military Secretary, Chief Operations Officer, and Principal Staff Officer. He commanded Air Defense Battalion, Infantry Brigades, and the Valley Division, and others. Internationally, he served as a UN peacekeeper in Lebanon and DR Congo, and as military advisor at Nepal's permanent mission to the UN in New York, and holds PhD from Cleveland University. After retiring, he was appointed to Nepal's high-level National Security Formulation Committee and National Security Policy Action Task Force. General Dr. Silva, I would like to give the floor to you. You have 80 minutes for the entire session. Please make your remarks.
Second session of today's seminar. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here as part of this distinguished panelist. I cannot promote and his team in the NICE for giving me this opportunity. The session we will dwell on, as you all know, on cross-border terrorism and the geopolitics of extremism in South Asia. Our deliberation will also focus on how interplay among geography, territorial ambition, domestic politics, and extremist ideology influence terrorism, cross-border terrorism, and regional security environment. We have our distinguished speakers to talk on the topic. We have 4 distinguished speakers. They are very well known to this group of participants. However, just to fulfill the formality, allow me to introduce each of them. I will begin with Dr. Professor Mina Mehdi. Professor Molko was the head of the Central Department of Political Science at Cleveland University. She has written a number of research articles on contemporary issues of politics and governance. She has been associated as an expert and guest speaker, and faculty members in Army Command and Staff College on advanced security, on national security since its start. We have second panelist, Ambassador Madhu Raman Acharya, to my right, to my left. Ambassador Acharya is a distinguished diplomat, former Foreign Secretary, and Nepal's permanent representative to the United Nations from 2005 to 2009. A leading foreign policy thinker, he has authored seminar works such as Nepal's Core View and the Talking Points. He remains active in diplomacy and academia, promoting public diplomacy and setting reform in Nepal's international engagement. Our third panelist is Dr. Shambhuram Singhara. Ambassador Singhara served as Nepal's permanent representative to the United Nations and Ambassador to Switzerland, also chairing the United Nations Human Rights Commission. As a member of the Special Committee Secretariat, he played a key role in integrating and rehabilitating rebel combatants. Nepal's most successful post-conflict peace-building initiative. A visiting professor in Geneva and Cleveland University, he has published extensively on conflict, governance, and stability. Our fourth panelist is Ambassador Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, extreme right. Ambassador Bhattarai is a former foreign policy advisor to the Prime Minister of Nepal. He was Nepal's ambassador / permanent representative to the United Nations, including Conference on Disarmament and International Organizations. Dr. Bhattarai was also ambassador to Swiss Confederations, Republic of Italy, and Republic of Croatia. He obtained a PhD in international relations from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He has co-authored a book titled Nepal, India, Democracy in the Making of Mutual Trust, published in 1993. With this brief introduction of the panelists, now as a chair, I would like to speak few words just to set the tone. We are actually living in the region most impacted by terrorism. The Global Terrorism Index (GTI) consistently indicates that South Asia experiences a high impact from terrorism. According to the GTI 2025, among top 15 most impacted by terrorism, 4 of them falls in this region. Pakistan top 2nd, Afghanistan top 9, Myanmar top 11, and India top 14. This session has special significance as we are in the post-Pahalgam terrorist attack situation. India has labeled this attack as cross-border terrorism. Prior to this, on October 7, 2022, Hamas carried out cross-border terrorist attack into Israel. Pahalgam terrorist attack led to the conduct of Operation Sindoor against Pakistan-based terrorist organization and its infrastructure. And Hamas attack in Israel led to the Israel-Hamas, Israel-Hezbollah, and Israel-Houthi conflict. Ultimately, Israel launched an Operation Rising Lion against Iran, which continued for 12 days. This is how cross-border terrorism and counter-terrorism landscape are shaping the security environment today. Terrorism, cross-border terrorism, geopolitics of extremism, and use of terrorist groups as proxy has extremely complex interrelationship in terms of their goal, ideological motivation, funding, and safe haven. Cross-border terrorism and extremism have demonstrated its power to trigger a mid-intensity to high-intensity conflict between the states. Such war may be a limited war or may escalate to an unlimited war or even to a nuclear war in worst-case scenario. Pahalgam terrorist attack, Operation Sindoor, and Pakistan's counter operations had put South Asia into a situation of new normal on war on terror. India has drawn a new red line that any act of terror will be considered an act of war. Other positions India has taken are zero tolerance to terrorism, nuclear blackmail cannot be tolerated, blood and water cannot flow together, terror and trade cannot go together, road to peace goes to war. I repeat, road to peace goes to war, and Operation Sindoor is postponed, not yet ended. Now the door is seemingly closed for diplomatic talks and wide open for war. Terrorism and cross-border terrorism is a serious threat to regional cooperation, peace and security. But the countries of the region are hesitant to reject double standards in countering terrorism. Some of them often engage in blaming and counter-blaming for supporting terrorist groups against each other. Combating cross-border terrorism is an uphill task, as some state actors are using terrorist groups as a proxy to achieve its political aim. Experience has shown that only air bombing and missile attacks cannot resolve the problem of terrorism and cross-border terrorism. For example, the United States deployed its military in Afghanistan after 9/11 terrorist attack to combat Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Israel has launched ground offensive followed by massive air attacks in Gaza and South Lebanon. In modern days, with the rapid development in technology, terrorist groups have access to long-range weapons such as missiles, rockets, combat drones, and cyber to carry out their attacks across the border. While we talk a lot about combating terrorism, we often often tend to forget addressing the root causes of the problem. Land or territorial issue is one of the key reasons of cross-border terrorism in South Asia and the Middle East. The states are laying greater emphasis on solving the root causes of the problem through military means. Recent meeting of Quad and BRICS have broadly condemned the terrorism and cross-border terrorism, but this region lacks a functioning regional organization to discuss on this very critical issue. Combating terrorism is the sole responsibility of the country whose territory is being used by the terrorist groups for safe haven. For example, government in Nepal resolved what we call combat insurgency through military means in 1974, in July 1974, as the group was conducting cross-border terrorism from Nepali soil against China's autonomous region of Tibet. Strategy of extinguishing or even paralyzing the threat of cross-border terrorism through overwhelming use of military power would not fully work unless the government of terrorists residing in the country cooperate or fully cooperate. In Afghanistan, it was not possible to paralyze the terrorist organization even when the Afghan government was fully cooperating with the United States-led global war on terror. Hence, the best preventive strategy would be a strategy of containment through effective use of intelligence, human intelligence, and technology-based intelligence, curtailing terrorist financing, preventing use of safe haven, and proactive response mechanism within own border. I think enhancing intelligence is very much part of the effective proactive response of any country. Thank you very much. With this, I now give floor to Professor Dr. Meena Vaidya for a statement. Madam, you have 10 minutes to present your thoughts. I think all of you have given some scope. I would like to request you to remain within the given scope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Silwal, for having me in your session. Namaste. Good afternoon to all of you, the distinguished participants, honorables, the scholars, security experts, media friends, and the fellow speakers on the dais. Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal, especially, and the entire team of NICE for giving me this opportunity. It's my honor to share some academic reflections on one of the pressing issues facing South Asia and beyond, that is the intersection of cross-border terrorism and the geopolitics of extremism. These forces, so far I think, are deeply intertwined, driven by the shared ideologies, political motives, and the strategic goals. We have seen throughout history that the nexus has taken many forms, and today we face some of the most severe manifestations. Hardly a day goes by without any security threats and challenges in South Asia, especially and particularly. We know South Asia is a region of immense cultural, historical, and economic significance. The region is quite rich in resources and home to many resilient, hard-working populations. And South Asia is a region that has nurtured great civilizations and enduring traditions. Guided by our Western philosophy, the region emphasizes always harmony, balance, and economics balance, yes, hardworking populations, and it has greatly nurtured the great civilizations and enduring our ancient traditions and culture. So guided by our Western philosophy, the region emphasizes harmony, balance, and interconnectedness, that prioritizing the equilibrium between the self and the society, nature and ambition, the power and the compassion always. But most unlikely, despite this greatness of our region, This has prevented us from realizing our full potential and a collective strength for collective progress. So, understanding first of all the nexus between geopolitics and terrorism is always a key to shaping effective counter-terrorism strategies. Second, addressing these challenges is always vital for ensuring regional peace and security, in line with the aspiration of the sentiment of the people of 21st century and human societies. Finally, holding state and non-state actors, the regional and the international community, accountable for sponsoring terrorism remains a critical global agenda. So, discourses and discussions in this area is the need of the hour. And so far, I think this is the significance of the conference. That is how it reflects its significance. Cross-border terrorism always involves activities that are supported always, they are executed, they are always planned from one country and targeted to another country. It often includes safe places to the terrorist groups, facilitating the movement of weapons and the fighters. And in some cases, direct state-sponsored attacks, reflecting both the cross-border intent and negligence by neighboring states. A prominent example is the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan in the region, more severely, with India repeatedly accusing Pakistan-based terrorist groups of cross-border infiltrations and attacks, particularly in Kashmir. The recent Pahalgam tourist massacre, which is quite pronounced in the pre-sessions, that was taken in April 2025, is the one where 26 civilians, including a Nepali national, were killed. And the incident stands as the deadliest civilian attack in recent years. This targeted, religiously motivated assault by Pakistan-linked militants had a profound impact on regional stability and human security in the region and beyond. In the same way, the geopolitics, that's the main area of this session. Geopolitics, as we understand, is the significance of geography in politics. But geography is highly politicized, where territorial, ethnic, and cultural boundaries are redefined through political narratives. Ladies and gentlemen, now geopolitics has turned to be geopolitics of extremism. It has been the strategy to influence regional and global political dynamics. Extremist groups, they are not only ideological or religious, but also the geopolitical actors, because they exploit power vacuums, they exploit the failed states, and they exploit the ethnic divisions and the external interventions to expand their influences and interests. According to the Global Terrorism Index of 2024-25 by the Institute of Economics and Peace, terrorism is expanding globally, with around 66 countries affected. In South Asia, Pakistan ranks the second, Afghanistan remains in the top 10, India 14, and Bangladesh 35, showing improved security despite occasional IS-linked incidents. However, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and the Maldives reported no recent terrorism, while Nepal is not heavily impacted, but it faces risks from cross-border movements, particularly in poorly monitored open border areas. So cross-border terrorism and geopolitics, political extremism in South Asia persist. It persists due to a combination of historical, ideological, and structural factors. We know the whole region holds the legacy of the region holds the legacy of partisan, the unresolved disputes such as Kashmir and the porous borders have prevented instability. The ideological radicalizations, the extremist propaganda, unregulated religious educations, and low civic awareness also fuel the radicalizations in the region. In the same way, external influence, the proxy wars, and foreign support to non-state actors have intensified the regional tensions. In the same way, political instability followed up by the weak governance, the internal disorders, and also the deep mistrust among the regional powers, they always hinder cooperation and intelligence sharing. In the same way, the socio-economic challenges coming out from poverty, ignorance, unemployment, and youth migration are fueling unrest and insurgency in the region. So all these factors pose a serious threat to nuclear stability. As we know, South Asia is one of the few regions where terrorism always intersects with nuclear risks. In such scenario, there is definitely a developmental impact, since we know resources are diverted from health, education, and infrastructures to security and defense. The situation we see that the region remains vulnerable to escalations through covert strikes, border confrontations, or diplomatic breakdowns despite international calls for restraint. So addressing these challenges requires a holistic approach balancing security measures, socio-economic development, and international cooperations. Holding states or non-state actors accountable for sponsoring terrorism is a complex and highly politicized. Yet, the international community possesses legal, diplomatic, economic, and military tools to curb accountability. Legal mechanisms such as United Nations Security Council resolution and international court proceedings can expose and penalize state-linked terror networks. However, diplomatic and economic measures often give inconsistent results in pressuring the state sponsors. Initiatives like the UN Counterterrorism Office's Financial Act Task Force, the grey listing and selective sanctions against cross-border terrorism frequently prove reversible and quite ineffective. In this context, India's Operation Sindhu may represent a necessary response to ongoing cross-border terrorism and fragile regional peace aimed at protecting civilians' lives and sovereign rights within international law. However, its effectiveness depends on the integration of precise intelligence, military capability, political clarity, and strategic communication, ensuring deterrence while avoiding the broader conflict. Additionally, the regional state must promote inclusive governance to mitigate political marginalization and ethnic religious grievances that increase extremism. So community-led development and youth employment opportunities and initiatives are essential to reduce reliance on extremist networks. Here I am to share a few lines. My special experience, since I am from academia, I would rather say that whatever we want in the nation, region, and the globe and beyond, we need to put it into the school and the educational institutions. So my understanding is education serves as a powerful tool against radicalization. Counting terrorism requires a long-term strategy. The key step is integrating harmony and critical thinking into school curricula so that future generations grow up with values that reject violence and extremism. This helps addressing not just the symptoms of the terrorist and terrorism attacks, but also the root causes. So because of time constraints, now I need to sum up. Cross-border terrorism and the geopolitics of extremism represent not only regional security threats, but also significant global challenges and undermine collective stability and development. Despite the diversity of political systems, historical context, and the competing national interests, it is imperative for South Asian states to collaborate in addressing these issues to ensure a safer environment for the future generations. For that, constant and sustained multilateral engagements underpinned by enhanced intelligence sharing and regional cooperation is crucial for enforcing accountability and deterring continued support for cross-border terrorism and extremist geographies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Dr. Nina Boyke Marla, for your enlightening remarks. Now I would like to request Ambassador Madhu Roman Asai for his remarks. Sorry for the floor. I would like to request to limit your remarks within 10 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jan Silva, distinguished panelists and distinguished personality and board, to break the monotony of the speeches that we have heard in the previous round and also now. I will be speaking informally and I ask your permission to be speaking from here. And also I ask your permission to be bilingual. I'll be speaking a little bit on, based on my experience. Most of my time as foreign secretary, I have to deal with terrorism, either its aftermath or causes or effects. So on that basis, I'll be speaking a little bit about it. When I joined as foreign secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nepal was facing the aftermath of the IC-81 hijacking from Kathmandu, which has shattered our tourism and it has even brought our relationship with India in a low air because they thought our security was not good enough and our terrorists could fly out of our airport with arms going open and then they hijacked. So I had to deal with that. Then suddenly we were preparing for SARC summit and then there was an attack in India for Parliament. December 2001. Again, things went very wrong and we were not certain whether there will be SARC summit. And there was similar, like Operation Sindhu, there was Operation Parakam at that time, which lasted for 9 months. And whether we should approach the SARC at that time, or Nepal, how we should approach with that. And we had to deal with the intense relations between India and Pakistan at that time, and also leading to after the SARC summit. Then our own government adopted a policy of declaring our insurgency as terrorist, which we call terrorist. And then I was given the task or a bit of going around the world asking for global condemnation of terrorism and bringing in political support as well as arms and money. So that I spent a lot of my time on that as well. And suddenly in 2003 or 2004, I forgot, some of our Nepali, 12 of them, Nepali workers were hijacked, kidnapped and slain in the Russian border in the beheaded in Iraq, and I had to deal with that. So based on that experience, I can a little bit relate my experience here. Why, first of all, I would like to say why we are discussing this here. Because there was, suddenly we had foreign terrorism. Once after 9/11 and then after the ISIS was done away with, we had foreign terrorism. There were not many incidences. And suddenly Pahalgam attack and then it came back to scare something. So we have to consider what is terrorism and what is the objective of terrorism. To me, any attack against civilians, innocent civilians, unarmed or innocent civilians, with a political motive of instilling fear in their minds. That is terrorism. There is no international definition, and I remember you and I were together in New York, and international community could not agree on an international definition of terrorism, and a UN convention, comprehensive convention on terrorism is yet to be adopted there, because of this fact. Because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That is what is happening. But any violent activity, politically motivated violent activities, instilling fear in other people's mind. But let's think about what could be the motive, what is the objective of the terrorists of doing this. For example, Pahalgam attack. They want to bring a forgotten issue between India and Pakistan, especially, to the limelight, and they want to internationalize this issue. Certainly when Kashmir, there was elections in Kashmir and everything was goody-goody. People were visiting Pahalgam and Kashmir and lots of tourists were coming. So terrorists wanted to disrupt that. And they were successful in that. Second objective they had is that they want to internationalize it, which we are unwittingly contributing to fulfill their objectives. It doesn't like this. Unwittingly we are contributing to fulfill their objectives of internationalizing their actions there. Even India, I would say, in India, send these delegations abroad, parliamentarians and others, and not to Nepal, but they also unwittingly contributed to internationalizing issues in the name of what is called as condemning or isolating Pakistan. But what happens now? Pakistan is sitting in Security Council and chairing the president of the country. So, if we continue to discuss like this will contribute to the objectives of the terrorism. That is what they want. The way I understand terrorism. But as we know, because we are living here, we are facing the aftermath of it, and because we are open border with India, and terrorists can use, they have instances that they have used our territory. So I will say that we must be unequivocal in condemning terrorism in whatever forms. No, because sometimes we have a little bit of hesitation here in this country to speak about terrorism, because this is a taboo subject. It relates India-Pakistan relations. So I would say, in condemning terrorism, we must be unequivocal. Whatever reason, nothing can justify terrorism. In not allowing our soil, we must be unequivocal. In providing any intelligence, law enforcement support against terrorists to our neighboring countries, we must be unequivocal. But there is another dimension where we cannot remain silent, because if it escalates and it brings a regional peace and security dynamics, that is the subject of our discussion today, then we have a reason to be concerned, because it will affect our tourism, it will affect our economy, it will affect our security. In the event of nuclear war, the previous speakers again spoke of brink of nuclear war, then this will affect us in a lot many different ways. So we have reason to be concerned. We will express concern about any possible escalation, or such as what happened during the 4-day war, or even there we have a reason to say, please restrain, please don't escalate. And I would like to say in this case that, all forms of terrorism, even state terrorism that is state-sponsored, or terrorism is given different names, doesn't matter. What is happening now in the name of what is called asymmetric warfare. The asymmetric warfare to me is another word for insurgency. Insurgency is another word for terrorism. You cannot justify those things. That is why there is this big common condemnation must be there. But I would like to say that even India's policy regarding terrorism has not been paying a lot, because they have been applying this policy of international isolation of Pakistan, or even rejecting them in Shah. What is happening? After so many years, again, terrorist attacks are happening. So they must review their policy with regard to terrorism, even cross-border terrorism, whatever they have adopted is coming back again and again. In 2008 Parliament attack, there were lots of attacks. It will come back again. They continue to do similar things. So they have to use a different policy context. In this sense, other speakers in the previous session also spoke a bit about it. You cannot deny the root cause of terrorism. You cannot deny it. If you are just dealing the symptoms, then you're probably getting it back again. For example, and there is no military solution to terrorism. That is a very clear fact. 20 years in Afghanistan with military occupation, Americans left Taliban as it is. They couldn't control Taliban. Taliban is back there. 20 years there. So how can you do it? So you have to have a political solution must be there. So this doesn't mean that you will tolerate state sponsor for terrorism. Obviously, there will be certain checks there, but you cannot continue ignoring underlying causes of terrorism. Whatever it should be addressed there. Why? What we can do as from Nepal's point of view, of course, we have to strengthen our law enforcement cooperation, intelligence sharing, prevent our soil and whatever porousness we have in our border or airport or other security installations, because there is a feeling that Nepal's security system is rather soft. At that time when IC-81 happened, our Indian French colleagues at that time were asking us, you had terrorists pass through your airport carrying 13 live arms, including 4 automatic weapons. How could they, in handbag? If that kind of porousness, if we are going to be allowed, then it will be a big source of big trouble for us. So we must be very careful about that. In terms of political condemnation, obviously we are with India, but in terms of its regional implications, security implications, and in likelihood of war, etc., we don't want that. I think that should be our policy, and we should always reiterate that. Now, Bill is reading. Oh, there was this mention of radicalization. Any form of political extremism or religious extremism or radicalization, we have the potential of, luckily we are, so up till now, we don't have that. But if that kind of thing penetrates here, it will be a big source of trouble for us. So I think we have to be careful about that. I think here I will stop.
Thank you, Ambassador Multimaster, for sharing your valuable experiences on the subject. I would now request Dr. Shambhuram Simphada for his remarks. So please limit your statement within 10 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished panel, Honorable Yadav, Honorable Saud is gone out of the room, I think. Honorable Dr. Rizal. I see a very distinguished experts in the room. My dear friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. On 22 April 2025, the world yet again witnessed man's ugliest face and act. Terrorists were heard asking which religion they belonged to, and seen murdering in cold blood 26 innocent tourists, including one Nepali national enjoying their holiday in Balian, Kashmir, India. Terrorism is the worst of man's inhumanity to fellow human beings. Individuals or groups undertaking such acts, and even worse, sometimes protected and supported by state actors, in any name or cause, must be condemned unequivocally, and actions aimed at eradicating terrorism supported fully, as Nepal has always done. Having made this abundantly clear, I will address the subject drawing on, first of all, my work in the United Nations, in particular the UN Security Council Counterterrorism Committee Executive Directorate, and its work on South Asia, and my forthcoming book, South to Bimstec, Breakthrough or Breakdown in Regional Cooperation. As the debate this morning and now is clearly shown, while condemning and taking some punitive actions in terrorism is much more complex and difficult to deal with. Primarily, the liberators' terrorist term, suppression of legitimate dissent or political opposition, misuse of terrorism as proxies. That is why, despite a debate, the UN, decades of debate, the UN has been unable to come up with a universally acceptable definition of terrorism. But there is a working definition, and its 4 instruments could be useful to guide South Asia to come to a common approach against this heinous crime. Fortunately for South Asia, the SARC Charter identified what I call the twin tragedies: the extreme poverty and political violence, of which terrorism probably is the worst, most degenerate form, and address this problem. And so the SARC Charter agreed that these were the main problems and of the region, addressing it as a principal priority of the members. The joint press release issued at the end of the first summit in Dhaka in 1985 approved that a study group should examine the problem of terrorism as it affects the security and stability of member states. Following up on this early lead, on 4 November 1987, during the third summit, right here in Kathmandu, SARC member states signed the Regional Convention on Suppression of Terrorism. The convention agreed on the definition of what terrorist act is, called for greater regional cooperation on legal issues, including their extradition, provide mutual assistance, and made the SARC Secretary General responsible for the evidence sharing, extradition and information, and expertise exchange. Then there was 1995, where terrorist offences monitoring desk was agreed and established in Colombo. There was an additional protocol signed in Islamabad in 2004, which incorporated the UN Security Council Resolution 1373, including the terrorism financing, calling for the immediate criminalization of collection and acquisition of funds for the purpose of committing terrorist acts. Now, despite these agreements and institutional arrangements, 5 of the 7 original signatories of the Charter were victims of extremism, radicalization, and terrorism. SARC Summit declarations keep calling for increased cooperation to deal with the threat of terrorism. And yet, why do South Asians continue to suffer from this heinous crime brought down as the only past, most recent case? In my view, the regional institutions and its leadership, its bureaucratic leadership, with a principal mandate to promote the welfare of the people of South Asia by addressing the twin tragedies, further equipped with various agreements and institutions to suppress terrorism, keeps turning a deaf ear, making the excuse that it does not have the mandate. Member states keep harping on regional cooperation and security while letting even the feeble mechanism for regional dialogue and cooperation die in its form. Even more perplexing, without addressing the underlying reasons, what really determines the course of interstate relations? And why SARC, in fact, UN at the global level and SARC in the regional level has failed what with creating new institutions simply to exclude one member of the other achievement. Mr. Chairman, the dynamics of time and technology has transformed the human enterprise so much that today no single country, irrespective of how powerful, can deal with some transnational issues, of which we've all agreed terrorism is one of them, especially cross-border terrorism. There are others, like climate, migration. This means, besides individual states' actions, regional cooperation must be strengthened, not weakened, if we really want to address cross-border terrorism. But also needs multiple approaches. From a philosophical political perspective, human history shows that no amount of force can subjugate the human will for freedom and justice. South Asia's distinction is in its culture of tolerance and coexistence, treating the whole human race as a human family, so well encapsulated in the ancient Hindu wisdom of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Buddha and Gandhi later showed the path of seeking freedom and justice through peaceful and non-violent means. Despite their long history of animosity, conflicts and wars, after experiencing the deaths and devastation of the two world wars and the establishment of what we now know as the European Union, a war among Europe's great powers, well known for a long history of war, conflict, animosity, like UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, is not only improbable but unthinkable. Why can't South Asia learn from their own history and transform interstate relations elsewhere? Even more serious, the twin tragedies of hunger and anger in South Asia in the near proximity of rising China could easily be used to perpetuate the China, India, Pakistan triangle of tension. Will it help any of the three? This in turn could push the entire Trans-Himalayas with Nepal at its epicenter to the brink of disaster as the two nuclear powered South Asian neighbors stood eyeball to eyeball after Korea. In the view of one of my favorite Indian scholar diplomats, the South Asian elite incapable of generating ideas and institutions suitable for their own modernization ends up borrowing something deadly from other cultures that practice either assimilation or annihilation. So they end up borrowing what they call terror. So terrorism in South Asia, in his view, is an intellectual tragedy, a tragedy of idealism, ignorance, and mimicry. Mimicry distorts understanding of right and wrong, recognition of friend and foe. As a result, South Asia comes under fire from those claiming to wage wars in their names. South Asian people, championing their borrowed means of political liberation or religious and cultural preservation, and sometimes even from those supposed to protect and govern them. What else can you call incitement to kill not just other innocent human beings, but even yourself in the name of belief politics or faith religion, if not the loss of faith in self, society, and faith itself? Interstate relations in South Asia stands at the critical threshold of amazing transformation, but also perplexing stagnation, as we witnessed today, and even disastrous regression. I'm done, almost just 1 minute. Comprehending this critical threshold, how it will affect us all, and how we should behave to realize the amazing vista of collective regional transformation and not allow the stagnation to continue, and even more worried, prevent the risk of regression towards an unprecedented breakdown never seen heretofore, is the most serious test of South Asian intellect and our attempt to address the real problem of regional security and cooperation in South Asia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ambassador Dr. Shambhuram Silpara, for your very enlightening remarks, particularly you have highlighted or underlined the various provisions of the SARC. Although SARC is not functional today, it have been a platform for political talks or negotiations to resolve issues. With that, now I would like to give floor to Ambassador Dr. Dinesh Bhatta. So you have 10 minutes for your remarks.
Namaskar. Chair, hello, panelists, in audience, I see distinguished personality from the ministers. I also see President also the co-deputies, former MPs, academic community, and friends from media. And I also see embassy staff, I guess, from the embassy. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal for this opportunity to be a part of this speaker. We are discussing terrorism in South Asia. I think without repeating, I will try to highlight some points. When did terrorism start in South Asia? To my understanding, I think it had its root in 1970s. There was a war in 1971. Pakistan lost a war that led to the creation of Bangladesh. And in 1979, there was Soviet Union came to occupy Afghanistan. And United States played a role in Soviet Afghan war, siding with Mujahideen. Everything was fear for the United States and Pakistan in fighting Soviets. And they used Afghanistan as a blunt instrument against the Soviets. And jihadists were recruited, and finally they succeeded in defeating the Soviet Union. And I remember a quote, after the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Mujahideen leaders were invited to the White House, and the president of that time said that Mujahideen leaders are the moral equivalent of our founding fathers. I think, and these same jihadists are said to have harbored 9/11 terrorist attacks on America, changing the geopolitics of the world. 20 years of stay in Afghanistan. Well, after 20 years of stay in Afghanistan, the United States and NATO members, Taliban returned to Kabul. Now it's a reality that the terrorists control the country. And Benazir Bhutto once wrote, how had not used Afghanistan as merely a blunt instrument to trigger the implosion of the Soviet Union. Out central of Afghanistan, Central Asia, Middle East, indeed the world, entire world, be different if CIA had not colluded with Pakistani ISI to train and empower the most extreme, fanatic, intolerant, and Western-hating elements of the Mujahideen coalition. And because in that process, all moderate elements were sidelined. And though there was no pluralism, there was no consultation, and there was no question of accountability in the government. And what happens after that? There was a Simla Agreement in 1972. After Simla Agreement, in 1972 only, the leader of Pakistan at that time, he said, we will beat India with 1,000 cuts. India tested nuclear weapon in 1974, and the Pakistani leader said, we will eat grass, but we will produce Islamic bomb. And these are the developments that led to the growth of terrorism in South Asia. And come to Pahalgam of April 22nd. It was the deadliest attack in several years. And it was not only deadliest, it was provocative. Because those victims were asked to identify their religion, and then they were shot at their head. This is condemned. Terrorists in all forms and manifestations must be condemned. And after 9/11 attack, there was a congressional authorization in 2001, and that talked of using all necessary and appropriate force against those responsible for 9/11. Hillary Clinton once said, the former Secretary of State and once presidential candidate, if you nurture a snake in your backyard, it will not only bite your neighbor, but it will come to bite you also. That is what is happening in South Asia. Let us see Pakistan Taliban, Afghanistan Taliban, and South Asia is the worst victim of terrorism. And what does the terrorists do? Terrorists create fear, terror, and insecurity. In the Pahalgam attack occurred on April 22nd. Just 5 days before that, Pakistani army chief said, we are different in every possible ways from Hindus. Look, the background. And recently, in a naval academy, he said that the people fighting in Kashmir, India calls it terrorism, and it is legitimate and lawful, and this quote unquote, Munir, Pakistani army chief, saying that. So he said that it is lawful and legitimate. And it is in the minds of leaders. Leaders in South Asia have come to mix religion and politics. And India's deep commitment to its founding principle, democracy and secularism, is in sharp contrast to Pakistan's religious Recently, I happened to read a book. The tragedy of terror that was by a famous columnist, Tabligh Singh, I think. She writes for Indian Express. She writes that Pakistan is interfering in Kashmir. But it is in the behavior of our leaders. She is writing that it is in the behavior of our leaders, and that also contributes to the making of this problem. Now, Pakistan, this South Asia, has two nuclear armed states. Both possess roughly 170 nuclear weapons across their respective countries. This makes the region much volatile and dangerous for all people. And Nepal stands for a general and complete disarmament of all weapons of mass destruction in a time-bound, verifiable and effective manner. So I think the bell has run. I would like to conclude that what should we do to tackle this problem? What should Nepal do? The first thing is condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, and build national institutions. Let the national institutions, including constitutional bodies, to work, and Nepal, as a chair of the Islam, should work to revive the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, and it is only through the collective cooperation, collectively working, that we can address this problem. On January 12, 2002, Bush administration Deputy Secretary of State, I think Richard Armitage, was visiting Pakistan. And that time Musharraf was the president, and he made him speak and commit. And he said, Musharraf said that no organization will be allowed to indulge in terrorism in the name of Kashmir. I think some things are being said, but they are being breached, they are being violated.
This is Raj Krishna, I'm the head of the armed principles. And my question goes to Dr. Dinesh Bhattacharya. As recently we have seen post al-Assad's regime that ruled for many years, more than 50 years, in Syria. And now there is transitional authority leader with Ahmad al-Sara, and whose real name is Abu Muhammad al-Zalani, and whose background links to the terrorism, and who is the active member, who used to be the active member of the Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization declared by US and Europe. And now, President Trump, the President of the United States of America, now he is considering normalizing the ties with Syria, who has the leader as a terrorist background and who does have a very deep connection with Al-Qaeda in the past. And similarly, now Russia recently recognized Afghanistan, some nation, and which is the Taliban regime. And after US-led coalition that conducted operations in that government in Afghanistan for more than 20 years, nowadays we have the Taliban, which is considered to be the British background, and now it is being recognized by the superpower Russia. Now, how do you see this situation? And I would like to see your perspective on this situation. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with Ambassador Dinesh Patrai, and that in that order. So we'll just want yeah.
Thank you for that question, and that is a very heavy question. Yes, President Trump normalizing relations with Syria, and now countries are engaging Taliban regime also in Afghanistan because they control, they are in power. They came back, they returned to Kabul in 2021, and they are there, and they are controlling. And someone told me that they control 90% of Afghanistan for the first time in several years. Some countries are also maintaining their diplomatic relations, diplomatic engagement with the Taliban regime. So, to cut the long story short, I would say that nations act on their interests. Interests come first. So, whatever approach, whatever policy advances their interest, they follow that. I think on Syria and all that, I would say this one. And I would like to add on SARC. Yes, we have been the longest serving SARC here. The person from the Eastern conflict study. Yes, I think the SARC is a geographical reality in South Asia. We need to revive it, and we need to give an opportunity to work. SARC, early on, as was mentioned by the co-panelists, early on in 1987 in Kathmandu summit, we adopted a SARC Convention on the Suppression of Terrorism. After 9/11, it was updated to cover all fundings and financial and all that. So unless we come together, work together, trust each other, I think regional or multilateral, any multilateral organizations is a collection of member states. Unless the members are willing to let it work, it will not work. So I think the member states have to be ready and come together and let SARC work. I would say just this much. Thank you.
With regard to how Nepal can play a good role in holding dialogues between India and Pakistan. That's a very smart question and a need of the hour as well. I think so far Nepal can give a very good effort in holding dialogues between India and Pakistan. And because regional peace is always Nepal's priority. Because since he always adheres to the principle of mutual understanding and good faith between and among the community of nations, Nepal always seeks and attempts to revive SARC and make it as active as before. And in Nepal's foreign policy, this is one of the priorities of Nepal's foreign policy in the present context. So it is for that reason also Nepal needs to talk, Nepal should give good offices and mediation in that endeavor. But so far I think Nepal should come up for that attempt from their domestic mess and the internal chaos and the disorder. She has to come up from all those disorders and the domestic mess so that she can come up and understand India and Pakistan and bring them together, sit them together and discuss for the further process so that SAARC can again be revived as before. Thank you.
Thank you. On state-sponsored terrorism, Chan asked that question. I think that's my personal opinion. There should be no justification whatsoever for state-sponsored terrorism, even proxy war or you call it asymmetric warfare or whatever. There should be no justification, philosophical, legal, political, and otherwise. So I think that should stop there. On the chances of Nepal facilitating or mediating India-Pakistan dialogue, I will relate my experience during the SAARC summit here in Kathmandu. India and Pakistan's leaders, they were not talking to each other. They first shook hands at the summit. But our other delegates and foreign ministers were asking us, we used to encourage them to talk and sit down and talk somewhere. And one foreign minister told me, lock them in a room. Lock them in a room. And actually, we did that. What happened? From then, after the SAARC ceremony was finished, the concluding ceremony, the heads of state were departing the airport. So we arranged deterrence in such a way. Nepal's Prime Minister chairman had to go to the airport to see them off, previous heads of state and government. And we arranged the departure in such a way, Prime Minister Bajpayee and President Musharraf were left in one room, and we all left the room. So they had no option but to talk. So then they agreed something, and there was certain de-escalation. As you've seen, in this, every time there is a dialogue between India and Pakistan, it has happened after SAARC summit. Because they talk there, they find something and to engage, and then so there is this possibility, there is humility, and also SAARC promotes what we call it informal political consultation, informal dialogue, and that has always helped. So now terrorism is holding SAARC, hosting SAARC is in limbo just because of terrorism. So, but here the chances of dialogue on Kashmir. I was in India a long time ago. And in India, the Kashmir is key word. You cannot pronounce that word because Kashmir is taboo word. So we were not supposed to talk to anyone. But informally, quietly, say Syria diplomats and others, we talk what will happen to India-Pakistan dialogue. I used to ask. And then one Syria diplomat told me at that time, and I relate that. Hey, gentlemen, you see, you are a bit enthusiastic about this thing. You will not see in your lifetime, in my lifetime, I am not certain here is gone already. Is not see India, Pakistan, and Kashmir issue resolved. And gentlemen, you will not see in your lifetime the Kashmir issue resolved through dialogue. So he killed my enthusiasm there. Thank you.
Very interesting questions. Let me address myself to two issues. One is General Chan's question. Fundamental issue is what determines the course of interstate relations. Now, the intellectual discourse on it is very long and very intense. But the present model, in the present paradigm, is basically national sovereignty, national power, national interest. What the tremendous transformation in science and technology has done is in fact the entire sovereignty, power and interest paradigm needs to be understood and redefined. I'm glad that there's a gentleman who's doing PhD in the UK. Very recently used to say, we are going to the island of strangers. So later on, one of his predecessors, Rishi Sunak, was of Indian origin. So you see, our whole conceptualization of what constitutes the nation state, sovereignty and power and interest, has to undergo a process of transformation which nations have not been able to do. And the problem with the current paradigm, what we call the post-World War II paradigm, is it's a dichotomy. On one hand, you have sovereign equality of nations in the UN General Assembly. But then on the other hand, you have the Security Council where the classical power hierarchy still exists. So as a result, international relations is the study of great power relations and how it affects the rest of the world. So we have to be very clear about how great powers behave and design our policies accordingly. And that's where we are stuck. Now on this question of SARC, of the Nepali, India-Pakistan dialogue, I remember two incidents. One is, of course, I was attending a Wilton Park conference in a long time ago on exactly this topic. And I had to leave. I was still a serving diplomat at that time. And of course, I had to leave the conference because as the Foreign Secretary said, they started talking about Kashmir as the principal bottleneck preventing the India and Pakistan moving in this direction. So I had to leave the conference because Kashmir is a taboo. So if somebody saw that I was a Nepali diplomat attending that conference, and that's partly the reason for this, for what's happening. So I have addressed most of your questions in, as I said, my book, SARC to BIMSTEC, breakdown or breakthrough in regional cooperation. And the point that I made, that unless you address why the UN has been unable to transform the world, which it was initially intended to, created to do after the experiences of the two world wars, and why the UN failed as a result, we needed regional cooperation because thinkers came up with the idea of what we call peace in parts or development in parts. If you had regional cooperation, the same collective thought at a regional level, then maybe that would be better. But then we suffer from the same problem. So that is why I have tried to address this exactly the problem of what role could Nepal play. And in that, I have a fundamental problem in the constitution, in the way the SARC is created. SARC is a very bureaucratic institution. As I said, you have terrorism, you have the mandate, you are equipped with so many other, sort of agreements, and yet the Secretary General will not even utter a word terrorism because he thinks it's not in the mandate. What else do you need? I know that we have an army general chairing, and so when he looks at me, I have to hand over the back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just to sum up, regional cooperation, coming together, common understanding, the dialogue, and holistic approach are key to solving the cross-border terrorism and terrorism in South Asia. With that, I would like to thank the distinguished panelists for their remarks and also responding to questions raised from the floor. Now, I hand over mic to Vivek.
Thank you, sir. Before we, I would like